hello there, thrill seekers. That was Mr. Spock's theme from the Star Trek, the original series episode Amok Time, the one where Spock has to mate, if you remember that one. Very exciting little piece I learned for you today. And, okay, about 3 years ago, for reasons that should be evident if you can think about what happened 3 years ago, I decided to not speak about anything that had to do with current affairs or news or anything that was trending in social media on this YouTube channel. And for the past 3 years, making about 3 videos per week, sometimes more, occasionally less, I have pretty much stuck to that vow, but today I'm breaking that vow. I've broken it a couple of times over the last 3 years, but not very often, maybe 3 or 4 times. But I'm breaking that vow, and I'm going to talk about something that's trending on social media, and those of you who clicked on this with the clickbaity, thumbnail that I made for it know already what I'm going to talk about. And that is this thing that's been trending on social media for the last couple of days with the Dalai Lama kissing this young Indian boy and asking the young Indian boy to suck his tongue. Really weird stuff. In case you haven't looked at social media for the last couple days, there's a video that's been circulating, and it goes kind of like this. First you see this little Indian boy, and the Dalai Lama kisses him on the lips, and he kind of laughs, and then he holds the Indian boy by the chin, they touch heads, and then the Dalai Lama is kind of chuckling with the Indian kid a little bit, and then he says, "Suck my tongue," and sticks his tongue out, and the little Indian boy touches heads with him again. And in some versions it cuts off, but in some versions you see a little bit more. The kid never actually sucks the Dalai Lama's tongue, thank gosh. But, that's a pretty weird clip. And this has been shared on a lot of social media, and I don't know, I haven't been watching the TV news. I suppose it's been on the TV news too. I've seen it a lot on YouTube. A lot of conservative news sites on YouTube are showing it, and a lot of people are making like speculative comments about what this means and whether the Dalai Lama is into little boys and all this stuff, and people are saying, well, if this had been the Pope doing this, it would be a much bigger blowout, and the liberal media are giving the Dalai Lama a pass on this because they're the liberal media, and if it had been a Christian guy doing this, they wouldn't have, and all this stuff. And I don't know if that's true, because people don't seem to be giving him that much of a pass. And I just thought I would weigh in a little bit on this. One of the things I saw recently was that, well, wait a minute, maybe the first thing I should do is tell you the other weird part of this is the Dalai Lama's apology, which adds another layer of weirdness to the whole thing. Because here's what the Dalai Lama said in apology to this. It goes like this. His apology goes, "A video clip has been circulating that shows a recent meeting when a young boy asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama if he could give him a hug. His Holiness wishes to apologize to the boy and his family, as well as his many friends across the world, for the hurt his words may have caused. His Holiness often teases people he meets in an innocent and playful way, even in public and before cameras. He regrets the incident." So that's a kind of weird way to put it, because he's apologizing for the words. I guess he's apologizing for the incident. I don't know what the words "suck my tongue" is what he's apologizing for. But what I was going to say before I went on and backtracked and told you about the apology was one of the things I saw on the media was the whoever's the spokesman for the Tibetan government in exile has put out a thing saying that this is propaganda by the Chinese government who are trying to discredit the Dalai Lama. And I think that's plausible because obviously the incident itself isn't Chinese propaganda. The incident itself obviously really happened. But the idea of the Chinese putting this out as a way to discredit the Dalai Lama sounds completely plausible to me, because the Chinese government doesn't like the Dalai Lama, at all, because he's been a thorn in their side for a long time. And this might be a way for me to kind of talk about how I feel about the whole thing and about the Dalai Lama and the whole business. Because to me, I've never cared that much about the Dalai Lama. He's never been an interesting person to me at all. People ask me about him all the time, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know much about the Dalai Lama, and I don't care much about the Dalai Lama. I've never been that much interested in Tibetan Buddhism, and the Dalai Lama is strictly a guy who represents not just Tibetan Buddhism, but a very specific form of Tibetan Buddhism. When it comes to his religious role, is not just Tibetan Buddhism, just a very specific form of Tibetan Buddhism, a specific sect of Tibetan Buddhism. Much more than that, though, he's a political figure. So all I've ever thought of him as is a political figure who happens to be the representative of a small sect. Well, I don't know if it's a small sect, but a specific sect of Tibetan Buddhism. And I'm not interested in Tibetan Buddhism very much. I have a passing interest in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I've talked about on this channel here. But that's about all the interest I have in Tibetan Buddhism. And I don't have much interest in politics at all. And that's what I look at him as. He's a political figure. So whenever I see a book written by the Dalai Lama, and there's a lot of them on the shelves whenever I go to look at the Buddhist section of a bookstore, there's a lot of books by the Dalai Lama, and I generally don't even pick them up because I don't care what a politician has to say about Buddhism. It'd be like finding a book by Barack Obama or Donald Trump about Buddhism. Like, I don't care what Barack Obama or Donald Trump have to say about Buddhism, because what do they know about Buddhism? And I look at the Dalai Lama the same way. What does the Dalai Lama know about Buddhism? That's basically what I think of the Dalai Lama. I don't think the Dalai Lama probably knows a little bit more about Buddhism than Donald Trump or Barack Obama. But I don't consider him to be any sort of an expert on the subject, because he seems to me to be a guy who spent most of his time, most of his life dedicated to politics, and that's it. My one Dalai Lama story I can tell you, I don't have any meetings with the Dalai Lama or anything. I have any personal connection with him, but my teacher, Gudo Nishijima, has a little story that he used to tell sometimes about the Dalai Lama, which he was invited to a conference somewhere in the U.S. This must have been in the 1980s, I think. And it was a conference, a meeting of prominent Buddhists, and probably this had to do with Nishijima Roshi's work on Shobo Genzo that he got invited there. And at one point, the Dalai Lama, he was also there, and the Dalai Lama came and the room emptied out, and somebody said to Nishijima Roshi, hey, everybody's going to go greet the Dalai Lama. Aren't you going to come with us? And Nishijima Roshi said to the guy, no, if the Dalai Lama wants to come and greet me, he can. So that was his attitude towards the Dalai Lama, which should be pretty much my attitude towards the Dalai Lama too. There's not much there that I'm interested in. But this idea of this whole kerfuffle being something created, or at least maybe not created in its initial formation by the Chinese government, but at least put out there by the Chinese government as a way to discredit the Dalai Lama, seems plausible to me, because the incident actually happened apparently in February, and now it's April, and in April it blows up. So it seems to me that somebody trolling through stuff about the Dalai Lama, probably in some office somewhere in China, found this clip and is like, oh yeah, let's release this to the media and see if we can get some traction out of this. Because the Dalai Lama is getting old, and he's gonna reincarnate soon. So what happens with the Dalai Lama? My nephew was over here. He just left a couple hours ago. He was over here for the weekend, and he was asking me all this stuff about the Dalai Lama, and I was trying to explain it to him as best I understood it. But the Dalai Lama is a political figure. But the deal is, the Dalai Lama is supposed to be a reincarnation of, he's the 14th Dalai Lama, and he's supposed to be the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama, and on and on. And whenever a Dalai Lama dies, they go and try to find the next Dalai Lama. And I was just watching a video. I had to watch it twice. And even after watching it twice, I didn't fully understand it. But apparently when the 13th Dalai Lama died, they went searching for this new Dalai Lama, and they found some kind of a fungus on a tree or something that was pointing toward the northeast, and this indicated that he would be in the northeast of Tibet or something like that. And they found him, and then they place some objects in front of this infant and see how the infant reacts to these objects that were owned by the previous Dalai Lama. And if the infant reacts in the proper way, then this means he's the reincarnation of the previous Dalai Lama. And then they take that infant away from the parents and then raise him to be the next Dalai Lama. And this is something that's gone on for 14 generations, apparently. And this tradition goes back. Somebody out there watching this probably knows better than me, and will weigh in on the comments maybe about this with more details. I don't know, and there's plenty of places you can look this up on the internet with people who know way more than me about it. But apparently this has been going on since at least the 1600s, and may date back, traditions similar to this may date back way longer than this, of looking for the incarnation of the next, big Lama, big guy in Tibetan Buddhism. And there's even something I read about speculation that the story of the Magi in the birth of Christ, where Christ, as an infant, is supposedly visited by the three wise men of the East and presented with these objects. There have been people who speculate that is a kind of muddled version of a story of somebody trying to find out if an infant is the incarnation of a high lama, of a high Buddhist lama. I don't know. This is all speculative. But be that as it may, that is how the Dalai Lama is supposed to be chosen, the next Dalai Lama. Well, the Chinese government has already said that when this Dalai Lama, who's now 87 years old, and this year he'll be 88 years old, when he dies, which is probably not going to be too long from now, the Chinese government wants to find the next incarnation. Which, if you believe in this idea of finding a reincarnated Lama through this, special Buddhist powers of, divination and whatnot and all that mumbo jumbo, sounds absurd. Like the Chinese government is going to be able to do that. Like if you believe that's the way, if you believe that's a real thing, then you're going to say, yeah, the Chinese government, there's no way they're going to find the right guy. Only the real Tibetan dudes are going to be able to find the right guy. And whether you believe that or not, you can see how this is going to be a big political uproar. There's going to be, as soon as this Dalai Lama dies, once the Chinese start saying, okay, here, we found the new Dalai Lama, of course, there's going to be other people who are going to say, no, there's going to be a dispute for sure. For absolutely sure, there's going to be two people put forward, one by the Chinese government and one by, whoever is the official designated people by the, Tibetan government in exile. They're going to put forward their Dalai Lama, and then there's going to be two competing Dalai Lamas. I believe there's already cases where there are lamas other than the Dalai Lama who are put forward by the Chinese government and who've been put forward by the Tibetan government in exile already. So this has already been a point of dispute. But when it becomes the Dalai Lama, it's going to be a much bigger point of dispute. So the Chinese government has every reason to try to put the Dalai Lama into question. Whether this means the Dalai Lama himself, the current Dalai Lama, is a perv or not, I don't know. I've watched the video a couple of times, more than a couple of times, a few times in putting together this video, and I don't know, it kind of looks like he's playing a little game with the kid, but it is an awfully weird game. But it is kind of interesting to see all the conservatives, on YouTube, all the American conservatives going, look, the Dalai Lama is a perv, because they're the ones who are usually very anti-Chinese, and if they understood that this whole thing was a game that the Chinese government are trying to play to try to discredit the Dalai Lama, maybe they would be taking a different tack with this thing and trying to say, no, the Dalai Lama is obviously just playing a game with the kid and he's not a perv. You know, if I was Ben Shapiro or one of these guys, maybe that's the tactic I would be playing on, because if Ben Shapiro was smart enough, as smart as he thinks he is, and understood the game the Chinese government are playing with this thing, maybe that would be the tactic to take. Whether or not the Dalai Lama really is a perv, notwithstanding, I don't know if the Dalai Lama is a perv or not. I have no idea. But, it is a weird thing. It's a really weird thing. But, that's all I can say is that I don't care much about the Dalai Lama. My only other Dalai Lama story, which I just thought of as I'm saying this, is I put a very, very mild joke about the Dalai Lama in Hardcore Zen in the original draft. Something about, when people say His Holiness, what does that mean? Whose holiness? Something like that. It wasn't even a very good joke, but it really upset the people at Wisdom Publications, because Wisdom Publications is run by a group of Tibetan Buddhists, American Tibetan Buddhists. They're not Tibetan. Well, I guess there's some Tibetan Buddhists in there, but they got really upset at that joke. Not only did they take that joke out, they got mad at me for even writing it. So that was funny. Anyway, so those are my two Dalai Lama stories I have, and just the fact that I just don't really think the Dalai Lama knows that much about Buddhism, or at least I don't see a whole lot of evidence that the Dalai Lama is... I just don't care what the Dalai Lama has to say about Buddhism. He seems like a politician to me. So that's my Dalai Lama stuff, and I hope I haven't insulted anybody terribly by saying that. It's just my personal opinion, and you can discard it if you want. So there you go. That's what I think about this whole tongue-sucking Dalai Lama thing. The tongue-sucking Dalai Lama. That's what we should call him from now on. Anyway, if you want to contribute to me insulting the Dalai Lama some more, which I promise I will not do, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and my usually only ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. And also, people who've been sending me emails, because I put my email address at the end of every video, I'm having a little trouble with my email thingy at hardcorezen.info, and a guy is working on it for me right as we speak. So I've been avoiding replying to people's emails because a lot of them are bouncing back to me. So hopefully this will be fixed in a couple of days, and I'll start replying to emails again. So just hang tight if you're waiting for me to reply to an email that you sent me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. We put some balm on Ziggy's paw, and he seems to be feeling better. Somebody in the comment section said we should try that, and now he seems to be feeling a little better. Hey, Ziggy, say hi to the folks. Ziggy. Hi. All right. That's all you're going to get today. See ya. Bye.